like they're being oppressed. Give me a break. That's so ridiculous. I do with my pen. No, I mean that. They had, during apartheid, they had one of the highest levels of standards of living in the world. And black people there were in one of the worst. And that they're oppressed. What about somebody from Gaza? What about somebody from Sudan? What about?
Yeah, I was like, I just don't know what the collective response is in DC to fight against it.
The collective response is
It's after 5, isn't it?
Yes.
We all set? Okay, colleagues, we ready to go here? All right. Great to see you all here, and great to see everyone here in the chambers for this Committee of the Whole meeting of the Kalamazoo City Commission. So we'll start this off by calling to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for the Kalamazoo City Commission for Monday, May 12th, 2025. Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Cooney. Present. Commissioner Decker. Commissioner Hoffman.
Present.
Commissioner Pradel.
Present.
Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Vice Mayor Hess.
Present.
Mayor Anderson.
Here. Thank you, Clerk Borling. May I please have a motion to excuse Commissioner Decker?
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Pradel, supported by Commissioner Cooney. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Now is the opportunity for public comments for the Committee of the Whole meeting. Just a reminder, the public comment period for this meeting is 2 minutes. Please state your name and whether you live in the city. And also another reminder, this is a time for you to express anything on any topic that you're interested in, but there is not a time for dialogue during the public comment time. Thank you.
Toby Hannah Davies, city resident. My message to all of you on the City Commission is a very deeply felt appeal. If you decide that the Civil Rights Board cannot be a quasi-judicial board with the power to enforce our housing equity ordinance, then please direct your legal department to find another way to enforce it so that it's more than lovely words. Not all of the violations of the civil rights of your constituents can be sent on to the Fair Housing Center or to the state, because not all of them are covered yet by state and federal law. I'm rereading The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. It's a 2012 bestseller, and she's an acclaimed civil rights attorney, law professor at a list of schools, who's now at Union Theological. I will tell you at 7 o'clock how this is so relevant to our housing equity ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good evening to our mayor, our vice mayor, commissioners, and staff. My name is Charlay Davis with Isaac. Layla Saab, the author of Me and White Supremacy, talked to us with Pastor King during the fireside chat, and I want to quote her a little bit here. She said, "The beloved community, we want to live there, and a lot of times we want to skip over the work that it takes to get there. The beloved community is not a destination that we are walking towards or we arrive at. Is actually something that we must build within ourselves and together collectively." I think that it happens a lot of times. It sounds wonderful. Can we go there now? But we want to skip over the work. It's a place where everyone gets to live in the dignity of their full humanity. So we first have to ask ourselves, why don't we live in a place where everyone gets to live in the dignity of their full humanity? What have we been doing that means we don't have this place? If we want to get there, what do we need to do? So here we are, you all. We would like to come back to the principles, and that means that we have to tell the truth of how we treat one another, and we would have to tell the truth that there's a lot of lovelessness that exists. Love isn't a feeling. It's the practice of care, commitment, trust, and accountability. And she ended by saying, the beloved community cannot exist with white supremacy. So tonight, as we listen to the presentation, I do ask that you please listen with a building the beloved community mindset, using an anti-racism and equity lens. That means without the human emotion of defensiveness, leaning into collaboration with those who are impacted, without the mindset of paternalism, without the fear of conflict, and also with that courage of stepping out, not always agreeing with the system, but knowing we have to build the beloved community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Seeing no one else, thank you for those of you who made comments here for this meeting. Appreciate that. We are now going to be moving down to the work of this Committee of the Whole session. And I know there's been conversation about the role of our own Civil Rights Board here. And I've asked our city attorney, Attorney Leal, to look into issues related to that and what options there might be, what options may not be available to us. So Attorney Aaron Leal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Commission. Again, my name is Aaron Leal, and I am the City Attorney. And I am to provide a presentation on the response to citizens' request to amend City Codes Chapter 18, which is the anti-discrimination ordinance, and Chapter 18A, the city's fair housing ordinance. Over the last few regular meetings, there have been a lot of public comments from local citizens who have asked for this commission to amend these ordinances so as to empower the Civil Rights Board to be able to have the enforcement authority to civilly enforce civil rights violations that occur in the city. Some of the comments, and I've kind of generalized some of the main ones that have published up here. Kalamazoo residents are dissatisfied discrimination in the city is not being addressed. We need to give teeth to our anti-discrimination ordinances. And the City of Detroit's Civil Rights Board enforces their anti-discrimination ordinance. In addition, there was a proposed amendment that was submitted by the subcommittee of the Civil Rights Board that provides just the broad overview ordinance amendment, and it would have to be expanded, of what would be necessary to transform the CRB from its current advisory board status to what is known as a quasi-judicial board. In other words, acting like a court of administrative law. And I'll read the amendment that was proposed. The board may hold hearings, subpoena witnesses, administer oaths, take testimony, require the production of evidence, and issue appropriate orders, including dismissal of a complaint, to enforce subpoenas or order for production of evidence or other order to impose any penalty prescribed for failure to obey a subpoena or order. The board, through and with the assistance of the city attorney, shall apply to the appropriate court. And I've emphasized the key parts of that, which kind of reflect the increased power that is being provided to the board. So the obvious question is the city authorized to engage in the civil enforcement of civil rights violation, and by extension, the CRB? In order to before we answer that question, we have to look at the guiding law by which civil rights in the state is enforced. As all of us are taught in elementary school and in high school here in the state of Michigan, our Michigan Constitution, our most current version, was adopted in 1963. In that Constitution, Article 5, Section 29, specifically created a Civil Rights Commission. And that's a little bit odd as compared to other state agencies because it is a state agency, but it's a constitutionally created state agency. This sets it above all the other state agencies that are created usually by just general legislation or by order of the governor. And in this provision, there is a section of the types of powers that the Civil Rights Commission was provided. It is empowered to enforce civil rights throughout the state of Michigan. It's authorized to hold hearings, administer oaths, obtain attendance of witnesses through the courts, take testimony, and issue final orders. This is almost identical to the provisions in the last slide, which is proposed for our local Civil Rights Board. The State Civil Rights Commission has an operational arm that performs most of the work, the investigation, subpoenaing of documents, et cetera, and that is the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. Since the creation of the 1963 Constitution, or the adoption.
Excuse me, Attorney Leal, I guess some people want you to speak a little more closely to the microphone.
Oh, yes, of course. Since the adoption of the 1963 Constitution, there have been questions asked by various cities through their local legislators as to, one, what exact power does the State Civil Rights Commission have? And two, do cities and villages, townships, and other local governmental entities have a role in the civil enforcement of civil rights? Since 1963 until and forward, the Attorney General, Frank Kelly, who was one of the longest-serving Attorney Generals in the state of Michigan, issued 5 different Attorney General opinions over these two questions. One, the exclusive power to enforce resides with the Civil Rights Commission. And he did that by taking a look at the way the Constitution was provided or was enacted for the Civil Rights Commission, the powers that were granted to it, as well as that it is a body that the legislature cannot reduce its power through legislation or defund it. Two, the AG also opined that the civil enforcement of civil rights is a matter of statewide concern. This is why, as the authors or the drafters of the Constitution, especially this provision, put this as a constitutional body as opposed to a state agency. Because the CRC has civil rights throughout the state, this means, and over matters of statewide concern, this means that cities have no inherent power or delegated authority to enact ordinances that relate thereto. And what this is another way of describing that cities and local governmental units are preempted from entering into this arena. With respect to cities and the role of cities and their human relations boards, civil rights boards, their functions are limited to performing education, counseling, conciliation, and mediation. None of these activities or functions can be deemed as enforcement measures. As such, according to putting all these 5 opinions together, the AG has opined that granting the CRB the power, or I guess applying it to here, granting CRB the power requested is beyond the city's ability to give, and it duplicates the authority of the Civil Rights Commission. In addition, we contacted the Civil Rights Commission to ask them, have they ever authorized any cities to enforce civil rights? In 1976, the state legislature expanded the powers of the Civil Rights Commission, and amongst all of these powers, there were a couple of them in particular that provided for the opportunity or the option for the Civil Rights Commission to be able to partner with local governmental units in investigating and enforcing civil rights at the local level. In response to the question, the CRC has never granted any kind of agreement to allow cities to enforce at the local level. And they repeated what I have told you here, that the sole jurisdiction to civilly enforce civil rights in Michigan resides with the CRC. The representative from the CRC also told us that Detroit has requested enforcement authorization under that statute on 2 separate occasions, and each time the CRC declined to grant it that authority. In addition, we also contacted the City of Detroit to ask if their Civil Rights Board was enforcing civil rights at the local level. And the answer, the response was no. Their CRB, or the equivalent, is an advisory board only. And that is consistent with the ordinance that they have on the books in the City of Detroit City Code. So, also trying to address the question, civil rights is a very important concept and a very important right to protect throughout the state. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So what can we do to improve civil rights in the city of Kalamazoo? Before we can answer that question, we have to look at the data. What does the data tell us, if anything? Since the ordinance, the civil rights ordinance, or city civil rights ordinances went into effect in 2021, there have been 126 complaints filed. 87 complaints, which is 69%, were deemed not actionable. And what do I mean by that? 57 of the complaints fell outside the scope of what is covered by Chapters 18 and 18A, or they occurred outside the city of Kalamazoo. We don't have any jurisdiction to enforce our ordinances outside our city limits. 15 cases were referred to Legal Aid of Western Michigan and the Fair Housing Center to address private legal issues. There were legal problems, they just weren't legal issues associated with what's covered under the Chapters 18 and 18A. And finally, 15 complaints were referred to these agencies that are listed here, these other local governmental entities. With respect to KDPS, there was a complaint filed that pertained to officer misconduct, which was referred to internal affairs. With respect to the Portage School Board, there was an incident where a student was called a derogatory name and filed a complaint with us. We don't have any jurisdiction in the city of Portage or in their schools, so we referred it to the Portage School Board. With the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, there was an individual who filed a complaint alleging that her medical record information was inaccurate, so we referred that complainant to the proper federal governmental entity where that can be addressed. Out of all the cases that have been filed, we had 9 that were thoroughly investigated, where somebody in city staff, either in our office or in the city manager's office, did a thorough investigation, got documents, interviewed people, and 7 of these cases were resolved in the complainant's favor. 2 of the 7 were additionally reviewed by the Civil Rights Board at separate hearings where they got to comment and also provide additional recommendations to the city manager, which he incorporated in those 2 cases. 2 were dismissed. One of them, the applicant had open and active convictions that continued to disqualify him for renting an apartment. In Chapter 18A, a landlord cannot consider criminal history information, but can consider criminal convictions in determining whether or not to rent an apartment to an individual. Part of that analysis involves them looking at evidence of rehabilitation and other factors. And we define that in Chapter 18 as well. Because this individual was still in the process of going through probation, still had another year left, it did not meet that definition, and so therefore the landlord was able, under the ordinance, improperly able to disqualify the applicant. In the other case, we referred it to the Fair Housing Center. The investigation revealed that the complainant was evicted for non-payment of rent and not due to their source of income, rental assistance. So looking at that data, it suggests when you have 69% of the cases out of 121 that are, or 126 that are being deemed not actionable, that suggests that there is a great lack of awareness amongst the City of Kalamazoo residents, businesses, landlords and apartment community owners as to what chapters 18 and 18A cover. What I propose as an option for the city is to engage in more educational outreach. When you have that many cases that are not being actionable, I can envision myself in the role of the 69% of those cases, the individuals in those situations, who walk away thinking, the city's not doing anything for me. I've made the complaint and they just said, can't do anything about it. And I know how that can lead to disillusionment, frustration, and dissatisfaction. And so I believe that educational outreach of all the community, whether it includes residents who fall under protected classes, businesses, apartment community, the city should reach out and to educate them, through the CRB, and however I'm veering into the swim lane that the city manager and the operations cell for that area to develop a plan if that is what the city commission does. In fact, we have the opportunity because to start that process is National Night Out is only in a few months. The next question, I wanted to address this because you never know, can't predict the future accurately. So I wanted to address the question, what if Michigan cities were authorized to enforce civil rights? Earlier, I mentioned a 1976 statute that authorized CRC to enter into agreements with local communities to help them enforce civil rights at the local level. So this part of the presentation kind of discusses what the city would need to do to prepare for that. This is independent of whatever the state would require, so I don't know what they would require, nor did we ask them that possibility. So transitioning to a quasi-judicial board would be a costly endeavor. From the operations side, the minimum that we would need to start this program would be approximately $350,000. The city would need to budget for ongoing civil rights board and staff civil rights training, hire additional staff to investigate the claims, as well as to hire independent outside legal counsel for the board, and to put aside a appropriate budget amount for civil litigation, if it does, because the likelihood of decisions being challenged at that level increases and they go to the circuit court for review, so we would need to set that aside as well. Training is very important, and the reason why training is very important for all the board members as well as staff and the investigator to have is because this is a very complex area of law. There are many forms of discrimination out there that are protected at the federal and state level. Not all of them have the same what we call elements that you would need to prove to constitute a violation. You would have to know, and the board members would have to know all of those, as well as the changes that occur, what seems to be like an almost monthly or every month basis with the court opinions that come out. Now, I won't dispute that civil rights through court of judicial opinions, especially at the federal level, have been eroded over the last 20 to 30 years. It started with the Rehnquist Court and has continued. But you need to keep up with all these changes, and as well as the federal agency guidance, which seems to change every time there's a new administration at the presidential level. And with the training, it's very vital for people to know what all these areas, to know the law very well, to be able to apply the facts to the elements of the civil rights violation. They have to comply with federal and state laws. If they don't do that, if they don't apply the proper facts to establish the violation occurred, those decisions are subject to review in circuit court and could possibly be reversed and sent back down. So, in addition, the training also is very important to ensure due process to everyone involved, especially the person who is alleged to have committed the civil rights violation. That is one of the bedrock principles of both the federal and the state constitutions is that everyone deserves due process. All that means is that you need to give them an individual notice of a hearing and the opportunity to be heard. So in case you've gathered that there's a lot of training, this is going to involve a significant time commitment from CRB members. With respect to additional staff, you need an investigator and a staff person to be hired to assist the investigator. And that's because the investigator will go through the process of reviewing complaints, interviewing witnesses, requesting documents, and putting together cases for the CRB. This is very similar in the criminal to what a police investigator does in the criminal case context, where they do all this work, submit it to a prosecutor for charging, and then it goes before assigned to one of the district court judges. The investigator must have knowledge of civil rights laws and related investigation skills. And the most important point, once we get to this level, the city attorneys, none of the attorneys in the city attorney's office can be that investigator, because it makes them both a witness and, even though it's not a parent, prosecutor at the same time, which we can't do in a criminal court setting. And so they would have to be somebody different. And it also could expose the city attorney or one of the attorneys to being a witness or a defendant in a lawsuit. The last slide deals with hiring of independent legal counsel. And this is to protect both boards to avoid any conflicts in representation. The city organization, by charter and also by rules of professional conduct, is the attorney's client. And the voice of the organization, or the city organization, is the city commission. Any board that takes a contrary policy or legal position to the city organization places the city attorney in an awkward and conflicting position with respect to our representation. And I'll give you an example. When an attorney, when they engage two clients, and it happens in divorce settings or in business transactions, where they represent the both individuals, in the engagement letters they have to provide for the possibility that my representation, or the course of my representation during this proceeding could cause an adversarial interest between both of the clients. In that type of case, I'm required under our rules of professional conduct to disengage from representing one of the two individuals, and possibly both, depending on how adversarial that proceeding has become. And so this situation would be no different. And the best way that I can suggest to avoid this possibility is to hire separate legal counsel. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much, Attorney Lee. I'll appreciate that. Questions, Commission? Commissioner Cooney? Oh, you weren't? Oh, I thought, okay.
Not yet.
Not yet. Commissioner Prater?
Attorney Leal, thanks for your presentation. You mentioned earlier about the city of Detroit and their CRB equivalent, and confirming in two scenarios, both through the state civil rights board, but also reaching out to the city of Detroit, that you confirm that they are not a judicial body, but rather more of an advisory. Can you speak a little bit about how they are designed? How they function, how they do their business compared to like our CRB?
And I can talk to what is in the ordinance, what I recall from the ordinance. The individual and the city staff that had that conversation, and I don't know if that was part of the conversation, would be our DEI director, Tanya Hewitt-Smith. So but as far as the makeup, they are appointed the same way. They have a lot of the same duties and responsibilities that ours has, as listed in Chapter 18. And they do have hearings where they investigate the facts and then provide recommendations. I don't recall the exact person, but there is a person, kind of like a director, who would take that into consideration as part of their determination of whether a violation occurred and what potential mediation or conciliation opportunities might be available to address that particular violation. Anything beyond that, I would have to defer to Director Hewitt-Smith if she is familiar, if she has.
Sorry, but I wasn't sure who had
Yeah,
done the.
With the conversation with the City of Detroit was Tanya, and with the Civil Rights Commission was Assistant City Attorney Marcia Jones.
Hey, Director Hewitt-Smith.
Good evening, everyone. Just to echo what Aaron stated, yes, I did speak with a Lisa Kent. She was Manager 2/ADA Coordinator for the City of Detroit. And my direct question was, what is the role of your board? Do they do enforcement when it comes to violations or complaints? And she stated that they do have a director, but they work with the investigator, but the director is the one who pushes that information forward, and their board is advisory. So.
Did you get, and this is just secondary, you're getting that opinion as well, but did you get a sense of like how successful they found that group to be, or are they established making that process work? Did it seem like, or are they still trying to grow it, make it work? Did you get any sense?
I did not get the inclination that it did not work.
Okay.
And she did not indicate any gaps in the system. I can't say there is not, but the conversation did not lead down that road.
Sure.
But from my understanding, this is, as Aaron stated, is part of their ordinance, and it's been in
Awesome.
process for a while.
Thank you. Appreciate
Okay.
it. Thank you.
All right.
Another question?
Another
Yes.
question for Tanya.
Vice
Tanya, when you
Hess.
spoke to them in Detroit, did you, is their Chapter 18, 18A similar to ours for housing purposes?
Their department is civil rights, and they do cover fair housing, correct?
Fair housing, anything else in addition to fair housing?
They do fair housing quite a bit. I would have to look it up directly, but they have a long list of, if you go to their website, it is City of Detroit Civil Rights, and they have a long list of things that they do cover, ADA violations, that sort of thing. So they do cover. Of course, they're larger because they're a metropolitan city opposed to we are, but a lot of the things that we are basically handed as far as complaints, they are similar in that case, but like I said, they have an actual investigator to do the work, and no, they're not a quasi-judicial board.
Thank you.
Other questions for, yes, Commissioner Decker?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you guys for being here. I apologize for being late.
No worries.
Attorney Leal, you talked about the educational outreach to the community. And I'm not sure who can answer this question, but do we know what, if any, outreach has been done so far regarding Chapter 18 and 18A?
Since I've been here in June 2023, I'm not aware of any, but I'm, are you aware of any?
Are you talking about our current civil rights board?
Yes, have you guys
It
done
is in
any?
conversation. They are working on an educational component right now. They do have an educational committee already established, but the last board, there was a conversation of what are the next steps, what are we doing next?
Okay, thank you. And then for the training, does the board itself get regular training? I mean, you know, they're appointed to the board. Do they get a regular training like every month, quarter? Is there
No.
training? No?
No.
Okay.
Hopeful, but no.
No? Okay. Is there any training given when they join the board?
We do offer, as far as like Robert's Rules, board training, that sort of thing, but as far as community engagement, next steps, no, we have not done that.
So nothing specifically to the ordinance?
No, we do share yearly and sometimes twice a year. Fair Housing do offer trainings. We do send that out to the board members as far as informational, but it's up to them to choose to decide whether they sign on to attend that or not.
Okay.
It's not a mandatory.
It's not a mandatory meeting for them to go and get education on the ordinance itself?
No.
Okay.
We provide them with information, they get the packet, and we assume that since they sign off on it, that they have read it.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Wilson?
Pardon my voice, I'm a little under the weather. I think we all can agree that almost 70% of these complaints, not being actionable is an issue, and I like, training and outreach being one component of that, bridging that gap there. I was wondering if there were ever any considerations for any possible revisions to chapters 18 or 18A, considering the type of complaints that we seem to get most frequently here in town. In the city of Kalamazoo, that might be able to kind of cast a wider net for those? Or is it not an option?
As far as the individual grinding down to the granular level, the makeup, there's some that we know exactly what occurred. But but there's other instances where if somebody is called, walking on Bronson Park is called a derogatory racial slur or ethnic slur in and of itself, and they know who the individual is and they make the complaint, that is not something that's covered under our ordinance, because we protect public employment, housing, and public accommodations, and they're not being denied that. As ugly as that slur is, it is not something that would be covered, and that's part of the, there are other examples, but that's like part of what we see, that we wouldn't be able to create a violation for something like that, because as much, we do have both at the federal and our state, that free speech, which again is not something that we like to hear, but there is protection under the law for that, as ugly as it might be. Trying to cast, we would have to go back and look at each individual complaint and look at all the circumstances, but a lot of them, because they didn't occur in the city, we can't amend the laws to say, well, we're going to create a violation for anything that happens in the county. That would, we wouldn't be able to do that. We'd have to have each city do that in themselves.
Makes sense, thanks.
Other questions, Commissioner? Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you, Mayor. It seems like a lot of intention has been put into this process about why we can't do something. Mm-hmm. Was there any energy put into what are the possibilities outside of Kalamazoo if this has ever happened?
And that the intent and the focus has been the educational component, because knowledge is power. If you can educate the entire community exactly what is covered, what kinds of complaints, where the resources are, not just with the city, but with all the different agencies, that, in my opinion, would decrease the number of these complaints being deemed not actionable, and hopefully helping people and changing the opinions of the public to say, you know what, the city did help, or they referred me to the right person. That's where I think the educational would get us to that point, that position. And then it's the more obvious and the one that can have the largest payoff for all the community.
Okay, Attorney Liao, from your perspective, how important is it for the city of Kalamazoo to have a civil rights board? Because out of 126 complaints, I can count on one hand how many actually came before the CRB board, and there was no notification of 69%. And it feels as if we're just sitting here to say we did it, we checked a box. Kalamazoo has always been a city of firsts. We began to do work around expanding civil rights for LGBTQ. Plus, the state hadn't done that. We did it here in Kalamazoo. So I'm curious as to why we can't think outside of the box. My first year on city commission, there was a declaration made that we wanted to become an anti-racist organization and institution. Mm-hmm. And yet we're always bucked with something, all the why we can't do it. Why we can't. Where's the creativity? Where's the boldness? Where do we find out where it has been done? Because it would have never been presented to the city if it hadn't been done in other communities.
Yes. I don't disagree with that. I mean, I'm in my career and where I've been, we always look at the data. The data is always the best, an indicator as to is there anything there? How can we go about to fix it? What does the data tell us? And to me, the biggest outlier of that data was the lack of education. And so, in essence, while I did give a overview of why we cannot do that, I also provided the path of where we can get help to the community, the education to the community, to reduce that number, to change the opinions that we are doing something rather than what I described earlier. We're not doing anything because they're just dismissing or not acting on it. And that's not the position we want to be in. We want to change that. And that's what I think. Enforcing, the reason why I provided that is to make sure that, it is a substantial legal risk for the city to take on, and that the community as well as the commission needed to know that as part of your policymaking decision process, so that you're aware of the pros and cons. And that is something that I committed to when I interviewed for this position, that you will get the pros and cons from me in any legal decision or policy decision that you have to make. And I continue to do that, as much as it may not be the answer people may want to hear. It has to be said, just so that make sure that we can find the right option or options for the city. I'm not saying that this is over. I'm just saying that we can continue as a city organization to find other options to try to get there. But this was the one that was the most easily identifiable, and probably the one that would give us, could help change those statistics sooner rather than later.
Can we agree that doing justice work and anti-racism work is very uncomfortable, and especially within an institution? And you brought up when you were hired, I remember asking you specifically, did you have the ability to be bold, to go and show your face in community, to get outside in our community and meet with organizations and people to get the word out? And you told me yes. And then my second point is, when we talk about the Attorney General's opinions, cities and CRBs are limited to performing education, counseling, conciliation, and mediation functions. If we never get the information, how do we as a CRB function in those roles?
Commitment is a two-way street. Both, the staff and the board have to come together to help develop that plan. There is an educational subcommittee, so that is what they have to come together, and then also work with the city administration to figure out the plan. How do we accomplish that? When we all work together, there's strength in that to accomplish what we need to. If we do it alone, or one leg of the table doesn't participate, the table falls. It crashes down. And so we all need to work together.
I would agree with that. And we've been a city of first in many ways. And this is no different for me. And so I hope that we can work together to come up with something that will give the people that sit on the CRB the courage and also the energy and pride in saying this is what we're doing, because right now we're not doing anything. And when we talk about data, there is a difference in truth and facts. The facts say data. The truth is that people won't even come and complain because they do not feel that as a city we are doing anything. So that's the truth. So these numbers, in my opinion, are skewed, because we get calls weekly. I get calls bi-weekly. Other community members get calls weekly about what's really happening out here in these streets. And they feel like they can't trust the city. And we have done a disservice with the CRB board as to date.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. That was really good. So I think we've got to start off with this. We want to do everything in our power to stop the discrimination that is happening for people with housing. Number one, that's what we're going to start with. Acknowledge that there's a problem here, and acknowledge that we want to do everything we can to stop that. Secondly, if you are telling us very clearly that it is clear in the law that we cannot create a quasi-judicial body. We can't do that. So, as Commissioner Hoffman was suggesting, we have to now start with that and say, well, what are we going to do? And I propose that we set up, I don't know, a committee to work with the Civil Rights Board, and within a month, look and see what other cities what cities out there have found a way to do this, and come back with recommendations that we can work on. It's not enough just to say we can't do this, we can't do that. I think that we have to take an initiative here and come up and say, this is what we can do, here's what other people are doing. I would be glad to serve on that committee and work with the Civil Rights Board and move this thing forward.
Thanks, Commissioner Cooney. Other questions for Attorney Leal at this time? Commissioner Praedel.
One more question for you that I didn't think about before, but I wrote it down here as a note. But I've heard people bring forward as well about, well, what about the scenarios where the rights aren't protected by the state Civil Rights Board? Then do we have a right to protect those rights here locally? And I was just curious if you could just kind of share, I'm not a legal mind, obviously, and I'm just kind of curious to get your perspective about how that would look or work if somebody wanted to protect something that the state isn't doing.
Okay. And just when our ordinance was adopted, there were a few what are called protected classes that were included that were not protected at the state or federal level. The last legislative session, both houses, democratically controlled houses, passed bills to protect gender identity and then also source of income. No, it was not source of income. No, it was source of income, which were two provisions that we included in our original 2020 and 2021 ordinance, which are now protected by state law. The only thing that remains is convictions. Conviction records, there have been, it seems like every legislative session when the houses were controlled by the Democratic Party, bills were introduced to try to address that, and they didn't get, a bill wasn't enacted and then sent to the governor for signature. So that's what we have in our books that is not protected at the state and federal level. What we have on the books, the conviction aspect, seems to mirror a lot of what was under the HUD guidance document. There was a document they put out back in 2014 or 2012 that kind of addressed for HUD control finance properties. When a landlord looks at the conviction record, they have to do very similar things that we do under our ordinance. And that's what we kind of relied upon. That's what I've deemed as I've read that. That was withdrawn in mid-January of this year, that guidance, so that's no longer something we can look at. So that is the only thing that is out there that we have in our ordinance that doesn't have a parallel provision in federal or state constitutional or the statutes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for, yes, Vice Mayor Hess?
Yeah, I'm curious, Commissioner Huffman, when people come to you and don't report a civil rights violation, where does it go? Do you take it? Do you bring it to them? Do you encourage them to report to the Civil Rights Board? I'm curious.
Absolutely, yes. And when you've been discriminated against time and time again, you can go through this process and what? So yes, always encouraging to do it. And sometimes we get disenfranchised with the system. And we're working against a system. And there is something we can do about that system in the city of Kalamazoo. And it may be hard, it may be unpopular, but we need to do it if we're about what we say we're about.
Thank you. And so I think what I'm hearing is that we need to be proactive as opposed to reactive. We need to reach out and be proactive and educational. And a month, I don't know how long it's going to take to be proactive and reach out and do the educational outreach to folks. And then move forward from there as to what do we need to do? So proactivity is education, and to me, education is drawing forth the greatest truth. And so as we draw forth the truth from the folks who are feeling discriminated against, what does that mean, and how can we help them move forward with justice?
Other thoughts or questions, commissioners, this time?
Oh, just one more. I'm not done. I wasn't done yet, sorry. You know, the city does have its communication channels, and I don't know if, I can't say I recall seeing these things in our communications channels, in our social media posts, in our, like you said, National Night Out is coming up. Like, we could have folks at all the national nights out with information, put it out there. All of our lunchtime lives, let's put it out there. Let's have folks out there shouting it from the stage. And we have the City View. You know, we have the City View that goes out to every city resident every other month. So yeah, let's use the channels that we can use to get the word out there about what this is and what we can do and what can be done in the city of Kalamazoo, and move forward from there.
Other thoughts or questions? So Commissioner Cooney, you proposed, a subcommittee of sorts. I know we already do have one subcommittee right now that's working on our new manager hiring process. That's been pretty time consuming. These folks are pretty committed to that. I don't know if anyone is interested in just having further conversations. I'm sure you're open to that as well, but maybe we could determine who would like to participate in that and put a smaller team together and have conversations about how to help this feel like an effective undertaking in Kalamazoo. Sound good? Come up with that? All right. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I would like to say one thing in closing. I appreciate all of the support that I am hearing today, but I want to be perfectly clear as an employee with the City of Kalamazoo and a liaison of the CRB board. I want, first of all, I want to uplift Chairperson Faison, because she has been very passionate and vocal as far as like this movement and what's needed to be done as far as like getting it as right as possible. So I most definitely want to uplift her in that sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, I would love to see I'm welcoming all community, not just internal and external, to bring solutions to these problems that we are most definitely being looked at every day. And a extra committee most definitely would be helpful to me and my team. We will help you anyway. But all I ask is that we don't overpromise and underperform. So Commissioner Cooney, I love the thought of 30 days. It may take more than 30 days. But as long as we start somewhere, I'm most definitely welcome to support. Thank you.
Very helpful. I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Thank you once again. We are now down to the point on our agenda for commissioner comments. Just as a reminder, there's also an opportunity for commissioner comments at our business meeting this evening that starts at 7. Any commissioners that want to make comments for the good of the order for this meeting? All right, seeing none, thanks you once again for participating in our committee of the whole, coming here for this. And our next meeting starts in a little over an hour, and this meeting is adjourned. We got some proclamations. Period poverty awareness.